Welcome to this explainer. Let's be real for a second. If you're working in DevSecOps, you already know the drill. Application security is moving at absolute lightning speed. But somehow, the very tools that are supposed to protect us often end up bogging us down. Well, today, we're going to break down the architectural and financial traps of relying on single-vendor application security. More importantly, we'll talk about exactly how you can build a rock-solid, future-proof strategy to overcome it. Because moving away from proprietary vendor ecosystems, that's no longer just a nice-to-have, it's an absolute strategic imperative for modern enterprises.
All right, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the vendor lock-in trap, move into the costs of monolithic security, explore decoupling with AppSec Migration, discuss centralized visibility, and finish up with the ESPIN EVM solution. Let's dive in.
Section 1. The vendor lock-in trap.
So, what exactly is this trap? Well, what starts out as a super fast bundled procurement win eventually tightens up into a pretty rigid cage. Think of it like buying a fully furnished house, but then being told you're literally never allowed to change the sofa when it gets uncomfortable. You get this single unified interface on day one, and honestly, it feels great. Your developers start scanning applications immediately. But as your DevSecOps practices mature, you suddenly realize that expanding, customizing, or replacing any of those components is a massive headache. Before you know it, your security workflows, your CI/CD integrations, and your policy configurations are completely dictated by one single vendor's internal model.
Moving on to Section 2, Costs of Monolithic Security.
This quote really hits the nail on the head. What begins as operational convenience can gradually evolve into architectural rigidity. It perfectly captures the hidden success tax lurking inside these closed ecosystems. Look, a lot of AppSec vendors will win your business with highly competitive introductory pricing or volume discounts. But what happens when you start expanding across more repositories, pipelines, and teams? The platform becomes deeply embedded into your daily engineering workflows. Suddenly, scaling up your scan volumes or adding developer seats triggers incredibly disproportionate licensing costs. And when it's time to renew, your procurement team finds out they have almost zero leverage because ripping out that embedded tool is just way too painful.
And here's where we run into another massive issue: losing your freedom of choice. Application security is absolutely not a monolith. You need SAST for your source code analysis, DAST to check runtime behavior, SCA for open source dependencies, plus modern API and cloud-native security. And here's the hard truth: no single vendor consistently leads in every single one of these domains. A locked-in environment forces you to accept uneven security coverage. The suite strengths in one area, like static analysis, are totally offset by glaring weaknesses in something else, like dynamic testing. You end up constrained by the vendor's roadmap rather than driven by your actual security needs.
Which brings us to Section 3, Decoupling with AppSec Migration.
To escape that rigidity we just talked about, we have to turn to AppSec Migration. And to be clear, this isn't just some one-time tool swap, it's a long-term capability shift. By separating your vulnerability scanning from your policy enforcement and reporting, you're effectively smashing that monolith into modular, interoperable pieces. This means you can finally swap out a clunky, underperforming SAST engine or bring in a highly specialized API scanner, all without blowing up your entire DevSecOps pipeline. It gives you the agility to actually adopt best-fit technologies without disrupting everyone's workflow.
When you compare these two approaches side by side, the difference is literally night and day. On one hand, a locked-in environment forces you into proprietary APIs and bundled pricing, leaving you with generalized coverage that creates scary blind spots in complex architectures. But an AppSec migration approach? That uses standardized interfaces and modular pricing, unlocking best-of-breed specialization. This completely shifts the power dynamic right back to your procurement and enterprise architecture teams. It allows for continuous competitive evaluation of your tools, rather than being forced into long-term dependence on just one vendor.
Now, out in the real world, you obviously can't just hit pause on your security while you rewire your systems, right? An effective migration has to happen with zero downtime. You absolutely must adopt a phased approach, running your legacy tools alongside the new ones until everything is fully validated. Plus, it's critical to preserve your existing security knowledge. You've got to migrate your customized scanning policies and suppression rules so your teams don't suddenly start drowning in false positives. And finally, you have to support your developers with proper onboarding and updated IDE integrations to keep their daily productivity as high as possible.
Let's pivot to Section 4, Centralized Visibility.
Separate vulnerability management from vulnerability detection. It sounds simple, but that idea right there represents a massive architectural shift.
In a locked-in suite, the scanner and the reporting dashboard are effectively glued together. But if you want to maintain control and governance in a modern setup, your vulnerability intelligence has to remain portable and normalized, completely regardless of which underlying scanner actually found the data. You want to aggregate all those findings from diverse, specialized scanning technologies into one single unified visibility layer.
And finally, Section 5, the ESPIN EVM solution.
So how do we actually pull all of this off? Enter the ESPIN Enterprise Vulnerability Management, or EVM platform. This acts as your main orchestration and governance layer, shifting your whole posture from a rigid, product-centric monolith to a flexible, solution-centric approach. You get unified visibility across your entire multi-vendor landscape. And crucially, it scales without punishing your budget. It uses appliance-based pricing, which completely eliminates that nasty per-node or per-IP success tax we talked about earlier. On top of that, it brings in advanced automation to trigger tickets in your DevOps tools, and it ensures strict data sovereignty by keeping your sensitive vulnerability data private and on-premises with ESPIN AI integration.
Let's take a look at how this plays out in real life. Imagine unifying findings from top-tier DAS tools, that's dynamic application security testing, like Invicti and Acunetics. By piping the results from these powerful scanners straight into the ESPIN OVM platform, you instantly create a single pane of glass for all your web and infrastructure vulnerabilities. Your teams can seamlessly correlate data without the headache of constantly switching context between 5 different vendor dashboards. The day-to-day operations are actually super straightforward. You just export your completed scan results from Invicti or Acunetics in their supported XML format. Then, log into your ESPIN EVM platform, head over to the Imports section, select your scanner from the dropdown, upload your file, and boom, the platform auto-parses the findings. Oh, and by the way, here's a fun little insider tip from the source material. If you're ever importing Invicti scans and you spot a weird error about SQL3, don't panic. You can safely ignore it. ESPIN EVM actually runs on PostgreSQL for heavy-duty, future-proof scalability, so your data is securely mapped and ready for immediate analysis regardless.
Once your data is all loaded in, management can finally say goodbye to those disjointed, static reports. With the interactive executive dashboard, your team can instantly visualize the highest risk areas across the entire enterprise, and then drill right down into specific vulnerabilities with just a couple of clicks. Having this real-time interactive data saves an unbelievable amount of time, letting you focus your remediation efforts exactly where they'll have the biggest impact. It means fewer reporting headaches for management and much faster, highly targeted action for your engineering teams. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one critical question to think about for your DevSecOps strategy moving forward. Is your application security built for your future or your vendors? AppSec Migration really is the foundation for a future-ready security program. By embracing modular architectures and centralized vulnerability management, you guarantee that your enterprise can protect its software assets without ever having to sacrifice agility, resilience, or the freedom to choose your own tech. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope this gives you a clear, actionable blueprint to go take back control of your application security ecosystem.